Hi, Alan. I'm so glad you could join us today. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Let's talk about what it is that you do for Cisco. You have a pretty lofty title, including go-to-market, I think digital strategy for Cisco. What is it that you do? What's your role and what are your
Yeah.
objectives?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's a great conversation. Excited to chat today. My role at Cisco is part of our go-to-market strategy and operations organization within worldwide sales and marketing, with a specific focus on digital platforms. So, what are the digital capabilities, the digital enablers that our customer-facing teams need to drive the outcomes that they're accountable for?
All right, so I was right. That is lofty. I mean, there's a lot to have to figure
Yep.
out. And you have an organization, the customer-facing organization is how many?
Depends on where you draw the boundaries, but 17,000 plus people around the world in various roles across all the different customer segments, from the smallest customer to the largest global enterprises. So yeah, so it's and we do reach, kind of from across all of the sort of big go-to-market categories, from planning and goaling, to kind of measuring attainment and reflecting that sort of perspective back to a salesperson, more of the sales ops kind of stuff. And we have what I like to refer, so I think about it in three buckets: sales ops, sales execution, and sales enablement. Sales operations is really all that planning, goaling, measurement, compensation, those kind of things that are really kind of core sales ops. And then sales execution would be lead to cash. What do I have to do? Kind of my traditional customer facing deal process sort of categories. And then enablement is really, how do we get to the salesperson what they need, when and where they need it? So whether that's training, whether that's a customer facing asset, whether that's industry news, whatever it might be, how do we get that to them when and where they need it? So those are the sort of the three big buckets that we tend to think about things through.
And how do you decide which technology you're going to keep? Because I imagine you already have a lot of technology in place, and the landscape keeps changing. Vendors are merging, being acquired, new categories come out. So how do you keep evaluating over time?
Well, it is a challenging scenario, and at a company like Cisco, size, scale, Cisco, name a tool, we probably have it somewhere in our landscape, either through Cisco, kind of core Cisco, or an acquisition, or whatever the situation may be. So it's a challenge. I think there's really, to me, two sides to the equation. One is really kind of being forward thinking as a business strategy organization, to say, what is it that's like, it's what I said at the very beginning. What does a customer facing individual need to be successful in achieving the outcomes they're accountable to achieve? So we have to constantly be tuning that perspective. What is our sort of taxonomy of processes and capabilities that we have to be able to support? So we need to be really clear on that. Where our team's challenged, what expectations do they have that they're managing against? And so that's more of the business perspective. We're then dependent on our partners in the operations organization to maintain an effective sort of architectural review board, so that if we do introduce something into the tool landscape, we're doing it consciously and intentionally, and we are constantly evaluating current investments to look for opportunities for scale, consolidation, better stewardship of our resources, et cetera. So I think about it, I guess, you think about this as much or probably more than I do. So, I mean, does that make sense, where you really have to have, what are the business capabilities we need, and really being on the sort of leading edge of thinking there, and then having operationally in our organization a review and governance capability that tries to stem the tide of kind of tool proliferation without intent, so to speak.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And it's what I recommend that, and it's hard to do, which is to keep in mind what are the friction points? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What's the process? And then you go to the tools. But it's like painting a bridge. As soon as you're done, you got to start over again. So you always have to keep in mind what those processes are, what needs to be improved, and then tie that into the tech. So it's a continuous process, and it's very tempting to take a look at, oh, I heard about this new tool and we could really use something like that. So yeah, let's push ahead and just get that without regard to, well, hold on, how does that fit into the overall picture? Do we already have technology that can do that functionality and maybe we just aren't using it yet? So that governance you speak about is a very important but difficult task to undertake.
Yeah, what I find is, you take two tools in the sales enablement, kind of category, or delivery of learning, as an example. Maybe the tool you have solves for 80% of the problem. There really is a 20% gap, or maybe it's 10% gap. I'm making up the numbers, obviously. And that gap, whatever it is, 5%, 10%, 20%, that gap will be used to justify the addition of a new tool into the landscape. The challenge then is that becomes its own subset of the full capability needed. So it's what I find is that the tension point is being pragmatic and just recognizing that we serve a community that wakes up every morning with a looming quota over their heads. Their compensation is dependent significantly on their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter performance. And they do that in a competitive environment. It's, so that's the reality of this. So we have to be pragmatic. Where do they need help? How do we relieve tension, friction, pain, whatever it might be? How do we help them today, not 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever it might be? So there's pragmatism, but then we have to have a little bit of academic sort of reflection, because otherwise we're just constantly solving sort of for specific pain points versus thinking about the whole experience from someone who's unknown to the point they become a prospect, to the point they become an opportunity, to the point they become a customer, to the point they become sort of an opportunity to renew, grow, and expand the relationship out into the future. Like, you have to think about that whole end-to-end experience, or otherwise, like I said, you're solving maybe for that pain point, but not in a way that really addresses the full workflow, so to speak.
That's right. Yes, that makes sense. And you mentioned the proliferation of tools. That's easy to have happen because you do want to solve problems that are
right
at the moment. So how often would you recommend that companies take the higher level view and do sort of the governance review to see what all tools they have and to see if there are opportunities for consolidation or cost savings?
Well, I think it should be a continual review. At least that's what we're doing. I mean, we have the first thing they have to do is to document what's out there, and depending on the complexity and scale of the organization, that can be a challenge in and of itself, right? But yeah, what is the universe, digital tools and platforms that are currently active in our environment, and then constantly evaluating, et cetera. But I think at minimum annually there should be a really hard look at the portfolio and the architecture in general, and then decisions made for more of a long term. How do we start to consolidate? If we have two incumbents that fundamentally do the same thing, how do we make a decision about which one is going to be the enterprise solution? And then it's never an easy sort of snap out, snap in sort of reality. So then how do we build that roadmap to pursue that target state? So I think that needs to be a minimum, kind of an annual sort of review, hard review of the overall portfolio and how do we drive toward better scale, better enterprise resource stewardship, et cetera, right? Because every tool is not only the license that's required, but it's all of the support that goes along with that license to make it useful, active, et cetera, in the environment.
Yeah. Boy, you painted a picture that just demonstrates how complex the whole process is.
Yeah.
Let me get an idea from you what kinds of tools you're seeing being asked about more and more, right? So like just a feel for some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of technology needs.
Sales engagement is big. How do I be more, how can I, the tools and that give me the ability to be a little bit more prescriptive in my sales process, particularly in the faster moving parts of your business where you have salespeople who are earlier in their career and you want to assist them in their prospecting, but not just that. How do you assist them throughout the sort of the deal life cycle, the customer engagement life cycle? So that's a big thing. CRM is the place where we kind of house a lot of data and information, but it's not necessarily where a seller natively works. Like, where does a seller natively work? They natively work in their inbox and in their calendar, right? And in whatever, chat capability they're using. In our organization, obviously, we use WebEx, universally. And so, that WebEx chat internally with collaborators and then externally with customers and partners. And so that's where they natively work. So in my inbox, in my chat function, in my calendar, those are the places where I natively work. How do I make sure that as I do my just normal day-to-day work, that we're getting that information out and automatically aligning with our accounts, with our contacts, and with our deals or our opportunities in our CRM? For us, that's Salesforce. And so I think that's a big deal because that informs coaching, that informs sort of leading indicators of future outcomes. So that obviously all of the AI, machine learning tools and capabilities that are out there to try to build more trigger insights around what deals should I be pursuing, what customers should I be engaging, what confidence should I have in the likelihood of this deal to close, what could I do to improve the likelihood that this deal closes, what is, as especially for those who are in recurring revenue oriented businesses, the predictive models that help me see into the future from a forecast perspective around the ability to achieve certain metrics related to recurring revenue, recurring ACV, that kind of, the metrics associated with the recurring revenue businesses. That's a big deal. And the last category that's seems to be super active for us, at least, is all the learning enablement. How do I bring learning into the workflow? How do I make learning more bite-sized, interactive, crowdsourced, peer-enabled? All of those kind of things that those are the sort of the categories that seem to be the ones that I'm talking about the most right now.
That's what I'm seeing as well. And those really align well with the buckets that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The first one you talked about was the sales engagement. And
right.
I wanted to get your input on how the impact that has had on just the amount of data that you now have in CRM, because most of those will automatically put meetings and phone calls and all of that automatically into CRM. So do you find that also, apart from the productivity improvement, helps with the data?
Oh yeah, no, it helps in at least two ways. I'll say three ways actually. Number one, it certainly helps from a coaching perspective because I can look at kind of relative performance of my team as a manager, and what do I see higher performing salespeople doing that lower performing salespeople are not doing, and I have more visibility into their activities to be able to do that analysis. So the second category is just inputs into predictive metrics. So, having that activity data, having the data of who we're interacting with become part of the data that my predictive model is able to use to determine opportunity score or forecast confidence or whatever that might be, right? So that's really important. The third one, which is easy to overlook, I think, is if you're in an environment where you do account transfers from, goaling period to goaling period or fiscal year to fiscal year, the foundation of information that's available to the person taking on the new account is very helpful in sort of ramp up time for that new account owner, whether they're a new account owner because of attrition and or new hiring, or whether it's just intended transfer of accounts just because you do some shifts in your segmentation model or your coverage model or whatever the case may be. So those are three, I think, true benefits of having that better activity foundation in your CRM solution.
Yeah, those are good ones. And that last one is one that I think maybe people don't think about, but it's really important, especially if you have a large organization that's going to have some shift and assignment on accounts or territory. You need them to have that background data.
Yeah, we did. That was one of the business case justifications that was used for an investment in a particular tool to scrape that activity and contact data out of, for us, our Outlook interactions with customers and bring it into our CRM solution, which again for us is Salesforce, because we saw a meaningful change in time to productivity for rep taking on a new account and preservation of pipeline that they may have lost confidence in, or maybe have really not had the either the contact clarity of who to follow up on, or some of the details on the opportunities that were in the pipeline. Because all of that activity data was there, they had more confidence, and we really preserved pipeline and therefore delivered, I think, even better results from a bookings perspective. So it's a real dollar value use case metric, so to speak. Yeah.
Let's talk about the third bucket, the sales enablement bucket, and coaching, because imagine that, it's pretty critical to enable sales managers, there are so many of them, to be able to coach a large number of reps. And there are a couple different types of coaching that one can do. One is actual coaching on recorded sales calls, so you can help them get better at those. And then there's something that's totally different, which is more about deal coaching. And I know there's some software now that can help with that. Are you engaged in, I'll just ask the latter. I'm sure you're engaged in the former.
Yeah, definitely looking, especially again in our LDR, SDR, BDR type roles where they are doing mostly virtual interaction with the customer, and you can capture some of that content for ensuring that sellers are delivering the key messages, et cetera. So that's definitely important. Deal specific coaching is, especially in larger enterprise, complex, multi-architecture, multi-product, multi-solution, multi-component solutions, probably a better way to say it, to give sales managers visibility into the places where they need to be coaching their salesperson toward better likelihood of a positive outcome, giving them visibility into the types of stakeholders that are engaged. Are they achieving certain milestones in the deal process? That kind of thing, so that they can then engage with their seller on more than just worst case scenario, why didn't it happen? And in most cases, the best case scenario is, hey, how did that meeting go? It went great. Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Versus, do I know the milestones that were intended to be achieved in that interaction? Were they achieved? What are the next steps? A lot more specific, giving the manager a lot more specific lens with which to assess kind of where someone is in the deal process and how you can help guide them to a higher likelihood of a successful outcome.
Yeah, I know sellers, will just provide their personal judgment, which is
Yeah.
often biased. We talk about happy ears, right? And so
Yeah.
we want to talk about all the positives, but in fact, there are certain things that you want to make sure you do, and that sort of
Yeah.
puts the science back into the art of selling.
Yeah. Yeah. What are those critical milestones beyond just, sort of the categorical sales stages that we've all been, leveraging for years and years, but what are the milestones within these stages that need to be achieved to indicate that we are successfully progressing the deal from stage to stage? And so, yeah, I think that's super important. And we have to give the manager visibility to that level of detail so that they can ask the right questions, get to the right level of detail, because it's easy. I mean, everybody's busy. And so, how'd it go? Great, good, glad to hear it. Is it, committed, or is it upside? Like just getting to really kind of high level, important, inputs. But at the end of the day, one seller might say, yeah, it's 100% there. You can count on it. But then the reality is it's built on a crumbling foundation because there's really not the right, level of stakeholder buy-in. The business case is not, agreed to, whatever you might identify as those sort of critical inputs for something to be at a certain level of confidence in your sales process.
Well, Cisco makes a lot of acquisitions. That may be an understatement.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for how organizations can ensure an integrated go-to-market perspective?
There are a couple of approaches you can take. There's a do no harm approach, which basically says we acquire the company because of what they do, and we don't want to really kind of get in the way of that and just let them operate. That's more of I would call it a decentralized go-to-market model, where you're really saying we're a loose collection or federation of businesses that are contributing to some ultimate financial outcome for a larger enterprise. That's not what Cisco is. That's not what most companies are. The challenge is more when you're trying to have a more consolidated go-to-market where the customer is buying from the acquiring brand, and the acquired brand is assumed to be part of that, sort of overarching value proposition that the acquiring brand is bringing to the marketplace. At that point, I think it's two things, not to oversimplify it, but one is you have to know what are the customer engagement processes that you need to enable. At Cisco, we think about it through three general lenses. One is what we call highly orchestrated, which is typically think about larger deals, more complex, typically crossing geographic boundaries, global deals in nature, that kind of thing. So it's very orchestrated, lots of decision makers engaged on the customer side. Typically, there'll be other partners in the deal process, multiple players and components to the solution, even on the Cisco side. So that's a highly orchestrated model. There is, on the opposite end of the spectrum, just call it the digital self-service, where the customer's sort of going from awareness to order and adoption and usage and all that through essentially a digital channel where they're operating very independently. So that's typically the smaller end of the scale. And then there's, in this middle bit, the digitally accelerated customer engagement model. So where there is, sort of this hybrid of the customers doing some digital, sort of engagement independently, the salesperson is facilitating that, et cetera. So we have to know that we can support all three of those customer buying motions, customer engagement models. And then so that's kind of number one. What are the customer buying motions and therefore the customer engagement models that we need to be able to support? And then secondly, what is sort of the global template of processes and capabilities associated with each of those buying motions that we have in place. And then if an acquisition comes to the table, then we want to start with our global template for each of these buying motions, each of these customer engagement models, and say, why not this? It's not what you do, that's fine, but why not this? Not why do you do what you do? I'm going to say, why can you not do this? Why can you not do it this way? And there could be a couple of reasons legitimately why they can't. Number one, because they bring maybe a best practice to the table and we go, yeah, your process is better than our process. How do we get your process embedded in our process so that we enhance our global template for everybody, not just keep you independent of our current process. So if there's a legitimate best practice that organization is bringing, then we want to figure out how to get that built into our template. Secondly is compliance related or language, just sort of, whatever their requirements they may have. They may do business in a jurisdiction we've never dealt with before, as an example. And so what are the compliance related things that we need to deal with there? The third would be like true competitive differentiation. So if there's something that they require that maybe we haven't to date had to put in place because it's what enables them to be truly differentiated in the marketplace, then we have to decide, is that also a best practice that we should make available to everybody, or is that a differentiated capability that we need to keep in place for that acquired entity? That is the theory. The practice is a lot more difficult than that, but you have to have a theory to even get to practice. So I don't know, does that track for you, or? Yeah.
Yes, that's definitely a juicy topic. I mean, there's so much involved, and you have to have all of those considerations. You want to not get in the way, and yet at the same time kind of standardize. So that was a really good, helpful description of what someone might want to do. And I mean, I've gotten lots of great ideas. I'm sure the audience will too today, in terms of just making sure you have the right data, making sure there's continuity in terms of changing from one rep to another, ensuring that managers can do better coaching, how to put in some good governance practices in terms of auditing, your sales technology stack and evaluating that at least once a year. So that's just a few things that I took away. I really appreciate your time today. It's been very interesting.
Well, thank you, Nancy. It's nice to be here, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
That sounds great. I would love it.